For almost 2 years, I worked the overnight shift as a construction site supervisor on a hospital being built just outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. Most people think construction sites are dangerous because of heavy machinery or unstable buildings. They're not wrong, but none of those things were ever what worried me. What scared me was someone who showed up for work every morning before anyone else. The hospital project was enormous. 4 separate buildings, 3 cranes, over 200 workers during the day. At night, only me. My shift started at midnight and ended at 6 in the morning. I wasn't there to build anything. I locked equipment, checked fuel tanks, walked the perimeter, and made sure nobody wandered onto the property after hours. Most nights were painfully boring. I'd drive a small utility vehicle around the site every hour, fill out inspection reports, grab coffee from the trailer, and wait for sunrise. The only electronic system I dealt with regularly was the employee time clock mounted beside the front gate. Every worker scanned an ID badge before entering. At the end of my shift, I'd print the attendance report for payroll. It was simple until one Monday morning. At exactly 5:45, I printed the report. One name appeared before everyone else's. Employee number 047, clock-in time, 4:13 a.m. I frowned. Nobody was scheduled before 6. I assumed someone from the day crew had come in early. When the workers arrived, I found employee number 047. His name was Eric. He laughed. I wasn't here. I overslept. He even showed me the coffee receipt from a gas station 20 miles away. The timestamp read 5:18. He couldn't possibly have clocked in at 4:13. Payroll blamed a software glitch. I threw the report away. The next morning, it happened again. Employee number 047, 4:13 a.m. Only this time, Eric hadn't even come to work. He'd called in sick. I checked the security cameras. The front gate footage looked normal until exactly 4:13. Every camera froze. Not for long, 8 seconds. When the video resumed, the time clock screen displayed one message: access granted. Nobody appeared on camera. No gate opened. Nothing entered the site. Still, the attendance report showed someone had clocked in. I restarted the camera system, checked every cable, found nothing wrong. For 3 nights, everything stayed normal. Then, another worker clocked in. Employee number 112, 4:13. I asked him the next morning if he'd arrived early. He looked confused. I quit last month. He wasn't joking. His hard hat had already been reassigned. HR confirmed he'd left weeks earlier. His badge had been permanently disabled, yet the system insisted he'd entered the site. By the end of the week, 5 different former employees had supposedly clocked in. Every one of them had either quit or been laid off. One had moved to Arizona. Another had died from a heart attack 6 months earlier. Still, their names kept appearing, always at 4:13. I reported everything to the site manager. He blamed the software company. A technician replaced the entire attendance terminal. New scanner, new wiring, new server. The following morning, the very first entry on the report read, employee number 047, 4:13 a.m. Exactly like before. The technician insisted it was impossible. He stayed overnight to investigate. At 4:10, we sat together inside the security trailer watching every monitor. 4:11, nothing. 4:12, nothing. Then, every screen flickered once. Exactly once. The digital clock changed to 4:13. The scanner outside emitted a loud beep. Access granted. The gate remained closed. Nobody walked through. The technician slowly turned toward me. I didn't touch anything. Neither had I. When we checked the report, another former employee had clocked in. The technician packed his equipment without saying another word. He never came back. Things became stranger after that. Every morning, work had already been completed. Steel beams that should have taken 6 workers to install were standing perfectly in place. Stacks of bricks had moved across the site overnight. Entire sections of scaffolding had been assembled. The day crew celebrated. They thought another shift had finished the work. I knew better. Every camera covering those areas had frozen at exactly 4:13. For exactly 8 seconds. One rainy Thursday, I found fresh boot prints in a section of wet concrete. The concrete had been poured just after midnight. Nobody had permission to walk across it until morning. The footprints stretched nearly 50 feet, perfectly straight, no return prints. Just one line leading toward the unfinished east wing. Then, nothing. They simply ended, as if whoever made them had vanished. The foreman was furious. He assumed kids had snuck onto the site. I measured the prints. size 13, old-style work boots, the kind nobody had worn in decades. That afternoon, one of the oldest crane operators quietly asked me something. "You work nights, don't you?" I nodded. He looked toward the unfinished hospital. "Do yourself a favor. If you hear hammers after 4 in the morning, don't go looking." But that night, at exactly 4:13, I heard the first hammer strike. The sound came from the unfinished east wing. One hammer strike, like someone was framing a wall. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward it. The deeper I went into the building, the louder it became. Hammering, metal scraping, people shouting measurements. It sounded like an entire construction crew was working just around the corner. Then everything stopped. The silence was so sudden it made my ears ring. I stepped into the hallway. It was empty. No tools, no workers, nothing. As I turned to leave, I noticed something fresh written in chalk on one of the concrete walls. "Shift starts 4:13. I stared at it for a few seconds. When I reached out to touch it, my radio burst to life. "Mike," it was the site manager. His voice sounded panicked. "Where are you?" "The east wing." There was a long pause. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Leave right now." I asked him why. "You weren't answering your radio. I've been trying to reach you for 45 minutes. I looked at my watch. The next day, I searched through old newspaper archives. In 1994, another hospital had been planned on the exact same property. Construction was almost halfway complete before disaster struck. Just before dawn, a temporary concrete support failed. Part of the structure collapsed. 8 construction workers were buried beneath tons of wet concrete. Only 6 bodies were recovered. The project was abandoned. Years later, our company bought the land and started over. Nobody on the current crew had ever been told about the accident. That night, I made up my mind. At 4:10, I stood beside the time clock. I wasn't leaving until I saw who was clocking in. The site was completely silent. 4:12, nothing. Then the scanner lit up by itself. Access granted. The gate slowly rolled open. No one was there, but I heard footsteps. Heavy work boots walking across loose gravel. I couldn't see anyone, only the sound. The invisible footsteps passed right beside me and continued toward the unfinished hospital. Then, within seconds, it sounded like dozens of workers were walking onto the site. I could hear conversations, laughter, someone revving machinery. But the entire property looked empty. Without thinking, I followed the sounds into the east wing. As I stepped inside, the building changed. Fresh wooden framing surrounded me. Floodlights illuminated the entire floor. Dozens of construction workers moved around carrying tools and materials. None of them looked at me. They worked as if I wasn't there. Their hard hats carried a company logo I'd never seen before. Then one man stopped hammering. He slowly turned toward me. His face was covered in gray concrete dust. "You're late." Every worker froze, and at the exact same moment, they all turned to look at me. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my truck. The unfinished building was dark again, silent, empty. I resigned that morning. No explanation. I simply handed in my keys and left. 6 months later, the hospital officially opened. Curiosity got the better of me, so I drove past one afternoon. In the main lobby, a large framed photograph hung on the wall. It showed the original construction crew from 1994. Dozens of workers smiled at the camera. Then I noticed the back row, standing beside 2 men covered in concrete dust, was me, wearing an old hard hat, holding a clipboard. The date beneath the photograph read, October 3rd, 1994. I was born 4 years later. I left the hospital immediately. I never told anyone what I'd seen. Sometimes, before dawn, I still wake up at exactly 4:13 a.m. And for a few seconds, I can hear hammers, steel clanging, workers calling to each other. Always says the same thing: "You're late." This isn't just a story about ghosts on a construction site. It's about how some places never forget the people who died there. The workers from 1994 never left. They're still building, still waiting for the ones who replaced them. The hospital was built on their graves, and sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits for the next shift.